Alright, hey guys, welcome back. Had an excellent question from a viewer about the MOR, which is the manual override, the red lever down here, what it is, how it works. So I thought I would jump in to explain here and do a quick video about it. So the MOR, M-O-R, is the manual override lever, this red knob right here. And PT6s will have this. Different manufacturers call it different things. In the Pilatus, it's called the MOR. In the Cessna Caravan with the PT6 114A, it's called the EPL, Emergency Power Lever. But it does the same thing. So what you need to know about the PT6 is that it's operated pneumatically. So in normal operation, when we're using the PCL, which is the power control lever, or the throttle right here, there is a bellows, pneumatic bellows, that uses bleed air. It's like an accordion, PY bleed air, to manipulate fuel control to the engine. So as we move this lever up and down to increase or decrease power, there's PY bleed air that is expanding or contracting that bellows, and that's modulating the amount of fuel that is being let into the engine for combustion, so that controls the power. Now if that bellows develops a leak, or we're leaking PY bleed air, the engine is just going to roll back to minimum fuel flow. So we're going to see that on the NG, we're going to see it on the torque. So if we're flying along in cruise and all of a sudden the engine power starts to roll back, but we haven't made any power changes, then we should suspect a PY bleed air leak in the bellows. If we're really on the ball, hopefully, and this is something that we practice in the sim. We'll bring our condition lever back to ground idle there. And so what we want to do in that case, the first thing we want to do is just cycle the PCL back and forth a little bit to see if the engine responds to power changes. And if it doesn't, we know that this is now dead. The bellows has malfunctioned, and we don't want to use the PCL for engine power control anymore. So we just bring this back to idle and leave it there. And then we want to unlock the MOR. So this is seated into the locked position right now, and this isn't really modeled in the sim, but this actually lifts up and aft, so you pull up and back to unlock this lever, and then forward, and there's actually a dead band in here. So it's dead for about the first third to half of its travel, so you can unlock it and then move it pretty quickly up to about halfway or so before the engine is going to respond. And then we're going to be monitoring the NG and also the ITT and the engine parameters up here. And as soon as we feel the engine start to bite and we see a little bit of a response in the NG, we know that the MOR is doing its job. Then we're going to go nice and slow and gingerly, because at this point we have direct control over the fuel to the engine. So it's really easy to torch the engine with this thing if we're not careful and ginger with it and exceed the limitations. So it's unlock pretty quickly up to that halfway point or so to get through that dead band. And then as soon as the engine starts to respond, we just make nice, easy, gradual, slow power changes with this thing. I noticed that in the sim here, it doesn't do anything. It's just dead. It moves, but you see the engine isn't responding. And one of the risks of using the MOR is that the various governors, the torque limiter, the fuel topping governor, those are inoperative when we're using the MOR, so we can exceed the engine limitations pretty easily if we're not careful. So we just make ginger power changes with this thing. And one of the other caveats with this is that as the engine spools down, if you have a malfunction in the bellows, we have to catch the NG before it falls below about 50%. If we don't, it's going to be awfully hard to get the engine back with the MOR. So in flight, we have to be pretty quick about this. So if the engine starts to roll back, the NG is coming down, we want to cycle the PCL, make sure that that isn't working. If it's not, then bring it back to idle, and then unlock that MOR, quickly get it up to halfway, and get that NG coming back up with the MOR before it drops below about 50%. Otherwise, we'll probably have to use the starter up here to perform an air start, and that's a whole nother procedure. So, and if we're at low altitude, we might not even have time to go through all that. We just lost the engine. So it's kind of a complicated procedure. It takes some practice in the sim. Every year when we go back for recurrent, we practice this with the MOR. And it just takes a little bit of practice to get it down. Now, after we land, if we're using the MOR, as soon as we're safely on the runway, we're just going to shut the engine down with the condition lever, bring that back to cutoff feather, because as we slow down, the NG is going to be rolling back and rolling back and rolling back with that decrease in airflow, and the ITT is going to be increasing and increasing, and we don't want to over-temp the engine. So we'll just go ahead and cut the fuel flow with the condition lever at that point and let the engine shut down. We're done with it anyway. We don't need it anymore at that point. So that's the MOR. It's used only in emergency situations. It's a little bit tricky, but it's there to save your butt if you need it. All right, thanks for the question. Leave me your questions in the comments, guys. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you on the next video. Thanks.